sort of a time travel story. I knew that I wanted to have an approach that would be striking and unique.
Hello everyone, this is Simon from Bluray Junkies, and today we will be talking to film composer Scott Glasgow. Scott Glasgow has over 30 credits to his name, and we will be discussing how he got into scoring films, as well as a very special treat. This is, I guess you would say it's the world premiere of hearing some tracks from his brand new film STASIS. So this is going to be a real treat for all you listeners out there. This is going to be an in-depth interview with film composer Scott Glasgow. First of all, we want to thank you, Scott, for taking the time to do this interview with us.
Thank you for having me.
So for those out there who are listening who aren't too familiar with you or your work, you want to go ahead and tell our listeners briefly about yourself and how you got into scoring films.
Sure. Okay. Well, like you mentioned, I've done probably close to 30 feature films, and a lot of them have been distributed by studios. So around 2005 is when I got my start with a film called Chasing Ghosts for Sony.
Uh-huh.
And that was a Michael Madsen, Gary Busey, a lot of kind of bad boy types are in that film. A very dark crime noir film. And then since then, I did a bunch of films. I mean, right after that came Robotech, The Shadow Chronicles. And then from there on out, I just kind of started to keep doing films, and I had a Lionsgate film called The Gene Generation, which was a big sci-fi thing that did fairly well. Mm-hmm. Believe it or not, one of the smaller films I did called Low, that's kind of a Faust telling by Travis Betts. It has a life of its own. It's one of those small little movies that seems to get around. So sometimes the movies that you think have bigger actors and have a bigger budget are not the films that people get to know you for. But it's that small little one that's a little quirky that catches people's attention. As for how I got into scoring, I went to school for music, and I have a master's from the San Francisco Conservatory of Music in composition. So I was writing concert music, orchestral pieces, chamber music. I wrote an opera, so I was doing that kind of stuff. I always knew I wanted to get into film music, though, and it was all kind of connected. But I went through college because I wanted to know what the hell I was doing before I started doing it. And it gave me some great experience. At the conservatory, I had every semester we had an orchestral reading, so I got to make all my mistakes. And when I got back from San Francisco to L.A., I quite literally restarted the clock. I moved back in with my parents and got a job as an assistant with a composer and started to get a bunch of assistant jobs. And slowly I built a little, I guess you'd call it a business based on being an assistant. Then in 2005, that movie I mentioned, Chasing Ghosts. And the way that happened is I was doing student films. I did not attend USC as a student. I just got in the car and went there and met people. Hung a flyer, went to the shorts festivals, and just went up to people and said, "Hey, that was a cool film you did." Huh. And people called me. And so I did probably 5 or 6 of these short films. But one of those short films, the guy went on and got a gig with Sony, and that was the film I mentioned, Chasing Ghosts. And he called me one day and said, "Would you be willing to do it?" So, I mean, I guess if there's any lesson to be learned there, um, getting out there, meeting people who are in the business will eventually lead to you working in the business with whatever craft you do, whether you're a writer or a costume designer. The thing that doesn't work is sitting in your home.
Yeah. Yeah, looking on Craigslist for jobs, that doesn't work too well.
I mean, it
Yeah.
kind of doesn't. I mean, I hate to say that because the Gene Generation was my fourth film, and that led to a 10-year relationship with this director Perry Teo, and I met him online.
Oh.
So it can happen, but if I didn't have Robotech, he would have ignored me.
Huh.
He
Yeah.
happened to be a Robotech fan, and he had a film, and he thought, I can get the composer from Robotech? All right, cool. So, weird serendipity, weird having credits helps with the online part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Networking with as many people as you can. It's definitely.
Yeah, and it's really not hard. Just go, every one of us can go to a festival tomorrow. There's all kinds of festivals happening in LA and all kinds of different cities.
Hmm.
So if you're really interested in getting into films, just go to festivals, shorts festivals, any festival. I mean, I think there could quite possibly be a film festival in every city, every major city in America. So there's nothing wrong with buying a ticket, going to see some films, and then usually the directors are there, and you walk up and say, "Hi, my name's Scott. I write music." "Oh, cool. Nice to meet you, Scott." I mean, it's really not rocket science.
Yeah. And do you typically approach the director himself, or the director approach you, or do the producers uh, get you, or is it kind of
Good,
50-50?
good question. There's really three main ways composers get hired. Three main people, I should say, that are gateways. The director, of course. If the director likes your music and wants it in his film and it's the right tone and everything else, and maybe it's because your personality is the right personality. There's a lot of different things. But the director is the very first point of relationship and the person that recommends you and can pull you along as their career goes into studio films. They can bring you along with them. Producers. Producers is another way I get on films. It's usually in that case, producers have taken over the film. It just means that the director has been possibly removed, and the producers have a tendency to take over. I think that's happened to me about 10 films or so,
Mm-hmm.
where the producers have taken over and they hire me. And the third way is the longest bet, and that is through editors. Picture editors will throw in what they call temporary music.
Yeah.
That just means music that they cut to so they can get pacing and they can play it for people. And if they use your music, some might go, "Hey, that's cool music. Who wrote that? I want that guy."
Hmm.
But more like what happens is, "Hey, that's cool music. Tell our composer we just hired to copy that." So
That's
I say that's the weakest one. Really, it's about directors and producers.
yeah. Okay.
Agents don't get you films. Agents are really not for film music. Agents are a different animal. They negotiate rates.
Mm-hmm.
They protect your rights. They act as a liaison with the studio. But they don't get you work like an agent does for actors.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
I
Yeah.
mean, they can at the very top. Let's just say you're Marco Beltrami, right?
Yeah.
Let's say that you're looking for work and a film called The Thing comes around, and that director's never worked on a film before. He's a commercial director.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that director doesn't have contacts to professional composers. The studio does. So the studio will contact the agency and say, "Hey, look, I'm looking for somebody to score this Thing movie. The director said he liked Marco Beltrami. Can you set up a meeting?"
Hmm.
That's how that kind of works.
Now, who would you say inspired you the most to get into composing?
I am a child of the 80s, 90s, big, giant, epic scores in films, all those Spielberg films. So you've got John Williams, you've got, films like Back to the Future with Alan Silvestri, you've
Mm-hmm.
got films like The Rocketeer with James Horner. So I guess I kind of have a saying of the three J's: James Horner, Jerry Goldsmith, John Williams.
The
The three
perfect
J's.
three. Yeah.
Yeah. And I had already started playing in bands and playing music and stuff, and I just really started thinking, that's something I'd really like to be doing as a career. I think Alien was by far my most influential score musically. even though they chopped it all up and made a mess of it for the composer.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think it's really important as creators, whether you're a composer, a writer, to look at what things influenced you from a small child, because that is where you kind of end up being true to yourself. A great example of this is Danny Elfman. Danny Elfman was in the circus in France with his brother when he was a teenager. And you can hear that oompa, circus type music in his music.
Yeah.
So, or another example would be John Williams with the, John Williams went into the service for a while and wrote marching band music. Well, if you listen to Indiana Jones or Star Wars, there's marches everywhere.
Yeah, like, they, for writers, they say write what you know. So
Exactly. But the truth is that might get you some work, but that won't get you a career. Being someone original and looking at what you grew up reading and enjoying is really the best way to tap into what you are as an artist. And so that's really important when it comes to, I think, the development of composers, writers, any creative, actually.
Yeah, definitely agree with that.
Robotech, for instance, is what they call a leitmotif score. That means all the characters have a theme. And there's a character in there named Janice. Now, spoilers if you haven't seen the movie, okay? I don't mean to spoil it for you, but the only way for me to have this conversation is to kind of do this. Janice is seen in the lab where she's working, and you're going to hear this little theme in the kind of, it's a little dainty, little cute little theme that is actually the same theme as the Haydenites, which are the bad guys in this film. Except for when the Haydenites, you get it as a big march, and it's all kind of aggressive. So what I'm doing is I'm telling the audience she is a part of the Haydenites before that we even know it, but I'm doing it with music.
Ah, yeah. I noticed that. Listening.
It's foreshadowing,
to it.
and I don't. It's very, very subtle. It's almost indistinguishable. And so you can hear how I foreshadowed musically without telling everyone, hey, she's also a part of the bad guys, but I did it musically, and you can't even catch it unless you've got to watch the movie a few times before you catch it.
And speaking of YouTube, do you have your own YouTube channel?
I have a couple.
A couple YouTube channels. You want to tell us about that?
I've been teaching at a university off and on for the last 6 years, and every day I'd go off to class, I lecture. I'd come home and I think, I should turn this lecture into like a quick little video. So I created 2 channels. One is called Film Composer Corner, and that one is for more technical stuff. What kind of gear do I use? How do I prepare my files for the, just technical stuff? Then there's another channel called Cue the Music. And Cue the Music is more of a film music appreciation type channel where I say, check out this cool piece of music in this film that you may not have thought of before, I guess if I'm talking about music, it's going to go on Cue the Music. If I'm talking about technical gear, film music specific things with the career, that will go on Film Composer Corner.
Okay, yeah, we've been watching the Film Composer Corner, and you learn a lot of stuff from your videos. Yeah. A lot of things that I had absolutely no idea about.
Yeah, even like hard drive backups. Just like I have a whole video on hard drive backup. I mean, how mundane can that be? But it's so vital to know and understand, and so that you don't have a problem when you're working on these films. I do have another channel that's called Scott Glasgow. I think it's just Scott Glasgow or Scott Glasgow Music, and that's my composer channel. That's my career channel, and I saw it early, and that one goes way back to 6-7 years ago. And I'm going to start doing, it was starting with STASIS actually. I'm going to start creating my own content for that channel too. What's happening for me is that I'm going to start my own record label.
Oh.
Every album I've had in the last 12 years, which is 12 albums actually, have been released by record labels.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been great. They have great distribution, but the difference now is that CDs are dead. People aren't buying physical CDs anymore. So I decided to start my own record label, and instead of doing liner notes like you would get with a CD that you'd buy at a store, I'm going to do content videos.
Oh, wow.
Where I basically am going to break down the score. It's literally going to be called Score Breakdowns.
That is so cool. You know, for film lovers, even music lovers, that's a real treat to have. That's better than liner notes.
Yeah, well, you know, I always love liner notes. You know, just looking at the photos and reading stuff. But it's just gone. It's just our world has changed, and so instead of crying over spilled milk, I'm going to adapt and figure this new way of doing it is just put out the album digitally. It'll be on iTunes. It'll be on Amazon. It'll be all these places, and then I'll do this video, accompanying video, and I'll somehow in that artwork somehow let people know that the liner notes or the video whatever will be online.
Okay, that's cool. So when's the launch date?
August is when the Stasis comes out, so I'm planning on kicking off the label in August. My website's where you pretty much can check out my tracks.
So let's go ahead and go into Stasis.
Sure.
So what can you tell us about creating the sound for Stasis?
Well, Stasis is an interesting project. So one of the unique things about Stasis is, besides the love theme, there's a theme for the Huntress, which is more of a motive or a musical signature. And we wanted to find something in that film where the character, even though she's in the future or in the past, gets the same motive. So unlike everybody else, if you're in the future, you're going to have Blade Runner sounds, and in the past, or in the current time, you're having orchestral sounds, the Huntress, who's kind of like the Terminator girl in this film, has a sound that's consistent. So whether she's in the future or in the past, she still gets the same sound. And I chose an electric violin. So now it's a sound that's sort of synthetic and sort of acoustic. And I pulled a friend to come over and play that, so you'll hear it at the beginning of this track called The Hunted. And you can hear this note that slowly wiggles and gets out of tune with itself. And that's the Huntress's signature sound. Off the bat, you know, I read the script, and for the people out there that don't know, it's a time, well, I don't know if it's time travel, but it's sort of a time travel story. Mm-hmm. Knowing that it's a sci-fi film where people are traveling from the future, are traveling back in time and landing in other people's bodies, and the kind of good and bad, the good guys versus the bad guys, and you know, this kind of thing that's happening in this film. I knew that I wanted to have an approach that would be striking and unique, but I also knew we didn't have a budget for a live orchestra. Yeah. So that's the challenge. What do I do? How about this? How about instead of trying to fake an orchestra, forget it. Let's just try to just make a score that is all in the box, that's all in the computer, that it's not, I'm not trying to fake or try to convince you, hey, these are really good sounding strings, but they're not real, you know. I decided I'm just going to go with synths. And I landed on the idea of, why don't I do a score that sounds like Blade Runner, has the same synthesizers as Blade Runner, but use all my own notes. Don't use anything that sound. I mean, so basically on the superficial level, it has Blade Runner sounds, but it doesn't have any of the pitches. It's not, musically speaking, it's all me just using his sounds. But what happened about midway is we found that it wasn't working. And what was working was all the scenes in the future are scored like Blade Runner. All the scenes in the present are orchestra.
Okay.
So that way we have a contrast between future scenes, sonically speaking.
Okay.
And so I just abandoned. I would go to harps and strings and things like that when we were in the present time.
Yeah. So
there you go. There's an evolution of from the day one I set out to score the whole thing like Blade Runner, and found about maybe 1/4 of the way through that wasn't working, and to abandon that idea and change it to where only the future stuff is Blade Runner and all the other stuff is orchestral. And the great thing about that is it came out really unique. It really gave it contrast.
Yeah, that's a great example of how you need to somewhat be on the fly of what you're planning to achieve in a score. You don't.
I want to say that almost every film I've done, I've set out a certain plan, and things have changed. It's a birthing process.
Yeah.
It's a creative process that evolves, and that's a part of it.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that. A lot of people don't realize, the general audience, they don't realize how important it is for a character to have their own theme and the soundscapes to tell you subconsciously what's going on and where's this going and so forth.
Yeah, like Indiana Jones's theme. When Indiana Jones is winning in his fight against the Nazis, you hear that da 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 da, and you can't miss it. But when he's getting his butt kicked by the Nazis, he's hanging off a tank, and we're like, oh my God, there's no indie theme. It's a really powerful tool, music, in the way that it tells the story musically, just as important as the script. In many ways, I think it is the same.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. How long do you think you would say it took you to complete the score from start to finish, the score to Stasis?
I think it's tricky again, because from the time I sign the contract to the time I finish everything is usually about 6 to 8 weeks. But in this one, we agreed that I was going to score the film. We got the contract signed. I went to the set when they were still shooting, so I had time to gestate ideas. Granted, a lot of those ideas sucked, but at least I had time to do that. And I think it's an important stage when I sign a film is that first 2 weeks where I'm doing research. What am I trying to say with this film? When I don't get that time, when I literally get like 2 weeks from the time of signing and delivery, that's just instinct. You're just going. You're just writing whatever the hell you can to get done. And it's an uncomfortable process. Awesomeness Maximus was that way. Ghost Hunters was that way. I had 2 weeks on Ghost Hunters. There's no time to second guess. So Stasis, I had a little more time. I think in total it was about 5 weeks of writing.
How did you know Nicole beforehand, or did she?
No, I did not. I had worked with the director Perry Teo on The Gene Generation in 2007 for Lionsgate, and he's producing on this one. And so we had a phone call with me, Nicole, and him, and Nicole and I seemed to get along. So she said, "Great, let's do this."
Cool.
And that was it.
Yeah, I guess last we heard, I guess the movie comes out August 29th, I believe.
Yeah.
And the few tracks that you sent us, we really, really liked them. They were very enjoyable to listen to. We're still listening to them, and we really look forward to hearing the entire album. So we want everyone listening in to, when the score hits the markets, to go and grab it on Amazon, iTunes, wherever you can find it. Nicole told us in her interview that she's working on a new film with Sean S. Cunningham.
Yeah.
Do you know
She hasn't talked. She hasn't talked to me about it yet. But
Okay.
these things are always. Music is kind of one of the last steps in the process. So they have to do a lot of stuff. Filmmakers, I feel for them. They've got to get funding.
Mm-hmm.
They've got to get a cast together. They've got to get a script together. They've got to get sets together. So there's so many things that happen before music even comes into play. If Nicole would ever call me again, I would certainly jump at the chance to work with her because she's just, our communication was smooth. Everything was comfortable.
So Nicole, if you're listening to this, give Scott a call. Give Scott a call for your next project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, again, I mean, she could do anything. She could do a comedy, or she could do a silly thing, and I'd still be on, because again, it's the people that are behind the films, not the genre. The people behind it are good people. It's a great experience.
I know you got to go soon, so we'll go ahead and end this. And we want to thank you very much for taking the time to do this interview with us. And again, thanks a lot. And we'll keep in touch, definitely.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Simon. You guys are cool, man.
Oh, thanks. All right. We'll see you later. Bye.
Take care.